Hello everyone. Today's video tutorial, we're going to take a look at the basics of the G1000 in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So currently we have ourselves sitting here at the ramp. This is a Diamond DA62 twin engine monstrosity. It's a very smooth aircraft. It's a very easy aircraft to fly. It is perfect for our particular application at this given time. So what we're going to basically do is be taking a quick little flight down to Groton, New London Airport. Now before I actually started this flight, what I actually went through and did was to preset that flight plan using the flight planner that you normally work with. Now if you skip that step, things are going to be a little bit more difficult for you when it comes to making sure your waypoints are where you want your waypoints to be. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get things going here. Go ahead and do a quick little shortcut, save myself a second. Let's Control E for those of you who have missed that before. Again, not going to take too much time going crazy. Of course, we should have turned those on long before the engine started up, but we'll be okay in this particular case. All right, so the G1000 is made of two components. You have basically your primary flight display, which is over here on the left, and you have your MFD, your multifunction display over here on the right. Now, there's a lot of things that are going to make you a little insane when it comes to this particular version of the G1000. It's going to be a little wonky in some places. I'm trying to point them out for you as we go ahead and do things. So first things first is we want to go ahead and know the difference between setting frequencies, setting things for your autopilot, and then changing the modes of the individual screens. By the way, if you ever run into a situation where things do not work, you can always go ahead and flip this onto its manual reversion mode. That's what this red button does, but unfortunately we don't have that ability here, which is kind of a bummer. At the same time, it's okay, it works for us. So let's go ahead and see what we have right now. First of all, you'll notice there's this pink line here. This pink line is actually the pink line that's going to take us to our destination. Now you'll notice it's very difficult to see where that pink line actually terminates. Let me increase my RPM a little bit here. Got it. So there's a couple different ways we can solve this. The first thing you can do is take a look at the range option. If you take your mouse over this option here and go ahead and wiggle things, again, I'm scrolling in this case, you can see a nice little map that shows us our little route during our flight today. That works great. Now, what if you wanted to control a certain spot of the map? Well, the good news, you can do that too. What you can actually do is you can push down on this button with the finger key, and it's going to give you the world's teeny tiniest little cursor, which is what this little thing right here is. And now you can actually hit the edges of the screen with it to actually pan the main map around so you can take a look at different details that you happen to notice on the map itself, which is actually pretty cool. Now, if you want to get out of this mode, you just push down on this button one more time, and whoosh, we are right back. So I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so you can see those taxiways very, very clearly. This is an awesome feature of this particular unit. Okay, so what else do we get? Well, we have this little thing called an inset map. Again, going back to the PFD, primary flight display. This little map basically shows us everything this map shows us, but it shows us just a little bit zoomed in here. Let me go ahead and adjust my zoom here. Boop, boop, boop. And you can see that we can actually keep the zooms separate for both of these. So I could use this one as my ability to see kind of zoomed in, and I could come over here and I could change the range so that I can see everything zoomed out on that edge. It actually works pretty well for that particular purpose. Now, what do the rest of the knobs do? Well, let's take a look. First one up at the tippy top is going to be your navigation radio frequency. You're going to notice that this little box right here is what you're going to be editing. This is going to be what is selected. In this case, my nav1 radio is set to 113.900. And then it has, actually I should say, this is what it's standby. It's actually set to 110.50. Now, if I wanted to swap these two, you'd push this button. That's it. So, for example, if we wanted to dial into a nearby VOR station, I could dial it in like that, press swap, boop, and now I'm good to go. Actually, it automatically identified, and you can see the needle immediately shot over because we got everything working correctly. Sweet. So now you're going, well, that's pretty cool. Does this do anything else? Yeah. If you're doing an ILS approach, it will automatically load in the ILS frequency into this box so that you can do a quick swap-a-roo when you decide to switch over to it. Underneath that, you have your Nav2 radio. You're probably familiar with this. Note, by the way, that these sets of buttons are reproduced on both the PFD and the MFD. So how would I change this frequency? Well, it's a little bit more difficult, but actually not really. You just push this button in, set it to what you'd like it to be. So, for example, I'll do 115.60. And now I can press the swap button. And now you notice I now have the ability to go ahead and swap between these two very, very quickly and very, very easily. This works with communication radios too. So for example, I happen to be sitting here. This is a Hartford, Connecticut. If I wanted to switch over to ATIS so I could check the weather and all that other good stuff, I could actually just sit here and do 126.850, swap. Let's make sure I got the right frequency. Oh, 450. Oh, you're supposed to yell at the screen louder so that I can hear it. Oh, jeez, guys, come on. Go ahead and scoot down to 450 here. Swap. Hey, it worked. The fun thing is, in the real world, this is usually a guy who speaks it, not a robot. And now you can tell how bored he can be sometimes. Yeah, the weather's going to be windy. It's just kind of funny. Looks like our visibility is not great. Our wind's 260 at 9er. At 6, I should say. Visibility is pretty good. We got a little bit of clouds. Good. I was hoping for a little bit of instrument conditions to make this interesting. Pretty warm outside. Altimeter is 3000, which I've already set by pressing the B key. And they're using runway 20. Awesome. So now while that's going, I could be sitting here getting ready to go ahead. Again, I'm using my mouse wheel. You can also click if it makes it a little bit easier for you. So I can go ahead and come in here and say 121.60. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. That looks pretty good. Swap. And now I'll be talking to the ground. And of course, I could request ground and all that other stuff. But I'm not going to do that yet. Because what I really want to do is I want to go ahead and get my automatic pilot all kind of preset and ready to go before we even get this thing rolling. So how do we do that? Well, first things first. We have our altitude knob, our FMS knob, which lets us scoot around in different menus. We'll look at this during the flight more. And of course, we have our course as well as our barometric pressure. And then if you come to this side, you have both the heading selector as well as a copy of the altitude selector on this particular side. So what does all this mean? Well, if you grab the bigger on this side, you can change the barometric pressure. If you grab the one on the inside, which is a little triangle-y one, you're actually adjusting the course that you're going to be using on whatever VOR that you have at this time. So the other quick shortcut is if you hold your mouse over this where the finger happens, you can just crank it to set in whatever course that you need. And of course, the barometric pressure, I always just hit the B key to reset it in a hurry. It actually works really, really well. So for this particular flight, we're going to cruise at 5,500 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my altitude knob. And you notice you've got the small knob, and notice you've got the big knob. What I mean by that is if you hold your mouse and look really, really carefully, there's actually two different clicking zones here. There's the wide knob on the outside, and then there's the tiny knob on the inside. Cranking the tiny knob is going to go ahead and get us hundreds. Cranking the big knob is going to go ahead and get us thousands. Since we're heading east today, we're going to set that to actually 5,500 feet, which will be perfect for our purposes. Now, we want to use the GPS route to get us to our destination today. So right now it says VOR1. So how do we tell the autopilot we want to use the GPS? Well, now we're going to take a look at these buttons down here. Take a look right here where it says CDI. If you press this button, it cycles through all the different possible things that you could use as your navigation source for your navigation autopilot. In this case, mangling it a few times, you can see that my GPS is now selected. If I wanted to use a different one, I could just hit it. Word of warning, by the way, if this is the mode that you want, if you accidentally press this button, it will disable your navigation autopilot immediately when you swap to a different source. So don't forget to re-enable it if you're relying on it. Speaking of which, we'll take a look at some of these other buttons in just a minute. But one more thing I would like to do is take a look at my transponder. You'll notice that this has a little option to set your transponder. We can always go back, by the way. So in this case, I'm going to pretend this is a normal flight. I'll click on the VFR button, or you can just go into code and you can actually dial it in directly. So we can go back, and then we can go ahead and flip it to altitude mode because we're about to get rolling in just a moment. So this is the way I like it. One common thing that I always do, especially when you're dealing with automatic pilots and instrument flying, is I always like to set my heading to whatever the runway heading is going to be. In this case, our runway heading is going to be right around 200 degrees. It just makes it a little bit easier just mentally to kind of orient yourself, as well as double check that one during takeoff. You have a nice, good reference source. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. So we're actually doing a straight out because we're departing south.
Diamond 64 request taxi for departing straight out with India.
Oh, I have India today.
Diamond 64 taxi to and hold
Taxiway Bravo.
using taxiway Bravo. Contact
Taxi to hold short of 20 via Bravo. Contact on 119.6. Diamond 64.
taxi to and hold short runway 20 via taxiway Bravo Diamond 64.
All right, let's do it. Now you'll notice that I've enabled those little blue lines on the ground. Now some of you guys, the purist, will be like, oh, you can't do that. You've got to figure out where it is on the ground. For the purpose of this, again, we're looking at the G1000, the autopilot on the Diamond 62. I'm not as paranoid or worried about that. Hi there. I guess it's the police come to arrest me because I did an illegal maneuver. We could have used that pushback cart, by the way, but man, that's a little weird. All right, swing us around. We're going to go ahead and start getting ready for takeoff here. Whoa, watch out for the truck. Watch out for the truck. Whew, that was close. All right, take a look to the right. I'm going to make sure I'm not cutting anybody off. Looks pretty good to me. Look over to the left. Looks pretty good to me. All right, go ahead and put our one notch of flaps down that we're going to require for this flight. And we have to hold short of that line right there. And stop. All right, let's go ahead and call tower. Brainerd Tower, Diamond 64 is at 20, ready to go.
20 ready for takeoff, straight out departure. Diamond 64 cleared for takeoff, runway 20, straight out departure approved.
Brainerd Tower 64 clear for takeoff. Have a good day.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 20, Diamond 64.
Man, does this thing need a lot of thrust to get rolling. But that's all right. We're pretty heavy. All right, once they've given us the approval, we're pretty much good to go. All right, lights, camera, action. Transponders are already on. Go flick on the landing lights. It's a good time to go ahead and start your timer. If this is one of those flights that you're doing by the hour or whatever for actual flight time, you got to get your block time up. But other than that, we are ready for takeoff. Let's do it. Yeehaw! This is not exactly a push you back into your seat aggressively kind of two-engine plane, but I'm really not complaining because it's actually pretty smooth. Once we get airborne and on our way, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the other features on the G1000. Go ahead and give it a little tug here. Try not to strike the tail. Airborne. Gear up. Get to about 100 knots. Then we'll bring up the flaps. Lovely. Wait for the plane to sink a little bit because of the flaps. And we are good to go. GTG. All right. Got a little bit of turbulence today. We're actually flying with real-world weather, so it's kind of neat. Go ahead and start our initial turn towards our desired course. And then we'll take a look at some of the autopilot functionality. Looks pretty good. Nice little twist in the river. I don't see anybody with their sailboats out today, but that happens sometimes. I'm going to get myself on a course of about 120. That looks pretty good right there. Okay, let's take a look at the autopilot for a second here. So just a little bit of trim. Beautiful. Okay. First things first, turn on the autopilot. You'll know that the automatic pilot is on by doing this. If you don't set any modes, frequency change approved for a Diamond 64.
Brainerd Tower, Diamond 64 frequency change.
Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to continue to climb. Now the autopilot is basically just holding us steady. We have to actually give it a mode. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to turn on navigation mode. So what this is going to do is it's going to use whatever source I set my CDI to drive the left and right of this aircraft. Next, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and set up my climb. So right now we have 5,500 selected as my target altitude, but we did not tell it how to get there. So there's a couple different ways we can do it. We can do it with a flight level change, which holds the constant speed. Instrument people, holy smokes, it is the way to fly. Or if we prefer, by the way, there's your flight director in case you want to fly these by hand. Or we could set it to a specific vertical speed. So in this case, I'm going to use flight level change mode. Now, what is this doing? This is trying to make the plane maintain a constant speed, and the climb rate will obviously change if we change our engine thrust. You can see it's doing a little bit of hunting here. I'll give it a little bit of a hand. There you go. We must have just passed over a major city. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Concentrate down here. And you can see we're pretty much stabilizing a little bit over the speed that we really want to be climbing at here. Now, what if we want to change the speed that we're climbing at? Believe it or not, that's not difficult. I actually got to back my engines out just a little bit. They're getting abused here. Well, it's pretty easy. You simply come over to here where it says nose up and nose down, and you can simply set it. So for example, if I wanted to climb at 110 knots instead of 120, all I had to do is press that a couple times. Now, why would you climb at a higher speed? Why would you climb at a lower speed? Well, that brings us to our next feature, TMR and Ref. This little menu here provides you with the ability to put in your VRR, your VX, your VY, and display it on your little ticker here. So in this case, you can see my best climb speed is actually 87 knots. I'm doing a cruise climb here. That is not a regular climb. Now, if you want to display that here, all you're going to do is come over here where it says toggle selection cursor, press it. Now, you have to be very cautious because there's the big knob and then there's the little knob. So you want to use the big knob to change between what menu you're on, and you want to use the little knob to make any changes. So in this case, I would like to see my VY. You know what? Why not? And that's all I have to do. Also happen to know that in a minute, my minimums are going to be about, I think it's, I'm just trying to look, 280 feet is what it's going to come out to be. And then when you're done, you can just press that button again. So what else do you have here? Well, let's take a look. We also have a timer, and I can see the automatic pilot is having a little bit of fun here. Sometimes you got to kind of brute force it and say, no, bad automatic pilot. So in this case, I'm actually going to flick up to a VS mode. Stay right there. Go back to flick mode. Okay, sweet. All right, I'll do that by hand in a minute. So what you also have here is you have a handy dandy little timer. This timer is so cool because you can make it count up or make it count down. So if you're in a holding pattern, for example, you can actually dial this thing in for your 2 minutes. To do that, you're just going to go to toggle selection cursor. Once you have it selected, you're going to go to the small knob, just twist a little bit, and then you can pick what digit you want to change. So in this case, if we wanted a 2-minute timer, we could do that. When we're done, we press toggle selection. In this case, we press enter, toggle selection, use the big one. Again, this is the outside knob. Set this to down, enter. Good. Go ahead, toggle selection. Now I can go to where it says start, and boop. Now I've got myself a 2-minute timer. Not bad, right? Let's go ahead and reduce my power just a teeny tiny bit. Oh, it is working properly now. Whatever. Okay, so now you can stop the timer at any time by just pressing the enter key. Of course, you can put that away if you want to. So that's how that works. Let's take a look at some of the other options here. One you have is this little inset. You can actually turn this on to be topo mode, which will give you little lines around like little buildings. Actually, it's the same mountains. Or you can go ahead and hit next rad. Next rad is just going to give you the weather. Personally, I usually flick the thing off because it's just one more distraction. I've already got a perfectly good display over here. Next, you have the PFD display. And my favorite thing on the PFD display is this button right here called Wind. This gives you the ability to show the wind like this, show the wind like this, or the pro way, show the wind like this. This one, by the way, is showing you the crosswind effect of that actual wind. In this case, I'm going to leave it on this mode because this is just easy for me to understand. Go back. Now you have bearing 1 and bearing 2. What does that do? Well, if you remember, we went ahead and set ourselves up on a VOR station nearby. So when I turn this on, you're going to get this little blue line that tells you where it is, and it's going to point a little needle towards it, as well as tell you the identification and tell you how far away it is. So for example, let's go ahead and flip this over to that one. Let's go bearing 2 and grab the one over there, and you can see the distances between the two spots, and you can even see these little handy dandy needles that tell you where they are that correspond to what you're doing there. That is actually really, really useful. The other thing you can do is you can press the DME button and provide yourself with distance measuring equipment information if you need it. So again, it's like that. By the way, you can also set an ADF bearing, but unfortunately, I don't have an ADF station close enough to actually demonstrate what that would look like, so I'm just going to have to leave that one out. Speaking of ADF, how would you set the ADF? Well, before we do that, note that right here you can switch between this arc and this arc, so you can do airliner mode if you're so inclined. Back button, I'm going to go back. Then you got to go to this option called ADF DME. This one lets you pick the ADF and DME. Again, you can use it the same way. We can use the big one to switch between modes. You can even change what the DME reference is. So right now, the DME reference is Hartford VOR. I can use the small wheel here to go ahead and flip it over to a PVD, which is obviously a significant distance. This is how you can change it. Of course, I can use the big one to go up here and set it to any VOR station that I think I may need. In this case, I should say an ADF station. So you can shut that off. So that's pretty much everything you're going to have on this particular PFD. It's actually really, really handy. It's going to give you distance. It's also going to give you what bearing it is. You can change all your radio stations. It's really solid. Let's take a look at the MFD. Now, what's the magic with the MFD? By the way, it's a bummer this button doesn't work. Now, what's the deal with the MFD? Well, you got a lot of things going on with the MFD. For one, you have this little map thing on the bottom. You can turn the weather on. Of course, you're sitting there going, I don't see any weather. What's the deal? This is actually selecting the weather radar's settings. This is selecting the GPS settings. So if I click them real quickly, you can turn on topo mode, which you can see the effect, or you can turn on XRAD mode to see any sort of weather. Now, watch this. Boop. Ah, what happened? This is the weather radar built into this aircraft, and it's actually showing you a horizontal view. If you don't want a horizontal view, you can go here and switch it to horizon mode, in which case you get yourself a pretty good horizontal view. Now, the neat thing is you can come back over here and turn your inset back on so that you could leave this in weather radar mode while you're concentrating on actually navigating the aircraft. Again, that's so slick. To get back out of that mode, you just go back and you go back to GPS. Or actually click weather. Just click the display button, my apologies. Now we can go back. Isn't that really, really, really cool? The only other button you have on here is declutter, and unfortunately I could not figure out how to make that work. Usually you press it if you, okay, it does work. Okay, good. So you don't have multiple declutter modes. You only have on or off, which is fine. I'm going to declutter. We don't really need it right now. Obviously you have your pan control, you have your barometric pressure. You also have a little wind reference up at the top. Now, here's the fun features. Now, this is where people kind of get a little stuck. First things first, if you were to actually take a look at this display here, you'll notice that there doesn't seem to be anything that we can use down here to go ahead and customize things. Well, there are. If you actually were to grab the big knob here and roll it, you'd notice you'd have multiple modes. You have map mode, which you've been using this whole time. You have a system mode, which is a great way to change your communication configuration, or you have nearest mode. Nearest mode is handy because it provides you with nearest airports. It'll give you the nearest anything you need as well as the frequencies available. I can do one of these things and kind of scoot through, and you can see it even highlights them on my map to make my life a little bit simpler, as well as the relevant frequencies and length of runways. Like this runway, that ain't gonna happen. Not in this airplane, that's for sure. And we can press that to get out of that. To return back to the main thing, we can just go boop, 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 and we're back here just like that. A couple different levels of airports. Swinging over here. Again, you can select the runway. You can select these items directly just by pressing that button. Pretty cool. Now it's time to talk about the, and I'm not going to call it a controversial feature. I'm just going to say it's that one feature that's going to be like, oh, okay. And that's the flight plan feature. Boop. So right now, our current flight plan is taking us from Hartford to Groton New London Airport. There's nothing special about that. Now, what if I wanted to go somewhere else? Let's say, let's go somewhere. Let's say I want to go to New Haven. Well, normally what you could do is you could actually press this button and then use this knob to go ahead and select a new destination. So I can come in here and go like this, and then you can go ahead and dial that in. So let's say we actually want to do New Haven instead. K, I really wish there was a keyboard you could just type on. I'm sure there is, and I just don't know the command for it. H, go to V, and we'll do N. KGON, enter. And now you'll notice we've added a new waypoint to our little adventure here. Let me actually zoom out. Ooh, is that as far as we can go? Or am I in the wrong mode here? There we go. And you can see that we now have a new destination all the way down there. So what the aircraft is actually doing is flying there to grab the line and then turn us back around. So that way you can actually add new waypoints. Now let me say I want to add another one. So I'm going to go to selection cursor. I'm going to go down to where I like to go. Use the little knob to dial in exactly what you like to do. Let's do something a little absurd here. Let's say we actually want to go back to Hartford. Keep in mind, if you set the mission up properly using your regular navigation log in-game, you wouldn't have to go through that process. Now check this out. Now we're going to Hartford first. And again, you can see that's sort of a quick and easy way to do things. Now, you can always quickly short-circuit the flight plan process by clicking the direct button and then simply selecting exactly where you want to go. So in this case, let's go ahead and stick to our original destination here. KGO. K-Bob. Yeah, that makes sense. There we are. Enter, enter. Ta-da! And now we're right back on course for KGON. And you can actually see that we've essentially short-circuited our plan here and made us go directly in that direction, which makes sense because that's where we were going before. So that flight plan feature is actually pretty slick, but it's a little bit easier to do it directly. Speaking of slick, I think it's time to actually start descending. Let's do that. So first thing you're going to want to do is select the altitude you want to descend to. In this case, I'm going to come down to 2,500 feet. Notice you don't start descending, because you have to tell it how to get to 2,500 feet. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a flight level change. And I'm going to reduce my throttle to about, let's say 30%. What's going to happen now is in order to maintain that incredibly high speed, the aircraft is going to have to nose over it in order to do so. I feel really bad for my passengers, but fortunately it looks like it's just me today. So I don't have to worry about that too much. As we're starting our descent, let's go ahead and take a look at the proc button. The proc button allows you to select your approach. So I'm going to go ahead and select the approach. Notice it's already selected our currently selected waypoint as where we want to go. So ILS runway 5 is actually not too bad if you want to pick through the other ones. You can use the small knob up closer to and actually zip through the ones you want. Like in my case, I'm using the big knob to alternate. I could even do RNAV of a 3.3, for example, which actually makes a lot more sense if you ask me. So I'm actually going to press enter. I'm going to go back to selection mode. You can also select a transition if you need it. You can set the minimums. Oh, no, you can't. We'll set the minimums in the other page. Don't worry about it. And then we can choose to load it, in which case you've added it to your flight plan. Or, if you're feeling very brave, you can activate it to go ahead and make it your current flight plan. So watch this. So now it has gone ahead and created a new series of flight plan options. If I click on the flight plan button, you can see this is now the approach. This is where we just were. This is Jordan, which is its first destination. This is Suffolk, Fizzer, and of course runway tree as well. So now we're good to go. Now remember that timer we set a little while ago? Notice when it ran out of time, it just started going the other way. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure my minimums are selected here. Minimums on. Notice we only have barometric minimums here because we don't have a radar altimeter. Bummer. Go ahead and exit out of that mode. And now we're looking in really, really good shape. Go ahead and put that away. Actually, you know, we should probably stop that timer. It's too bad the thing doesn't like pop up and start yelling at you or something like that. Man, would that be handy. Now, one big difference between the G1000 you're probably used to and this one is the fact in this one, you can't click on the flight plan button. Go like this. Select where you want to go. Say I want to go to Suffolk, and then press the direct button. That is, such a bummer. Hate that. Of course, we're going to hit FPL a couple times. All right, we're about to our altitude. I'm going to bring the engine power back in. 70 knots looks pretty comfortable. And let's go ahead and take a look at this monstrosity it has done to us. Press FPL again. And now you can see very, very clearly what it's got in store for us. It's basically going to finish up what we just did, go to Jordan, then go to Suffolk, then go to Fizzer. Now watch this. Let's see here. Watch this. You know exactly what I'm doing. Jordan. Do you see what we just did? Let me go to flight plan mode. Aha! Pretty slick trick, huh? That's just one way to kind of get around that. Normally, it's a little bit easier of a process, but I'm not complaining too much. Because again, it still works. You just have to be really, really quick with your fingers in order to pull that off safely. So now we're basically short-circuiting everything to go direct to Jordan. We're actually going to short-circuit things even more and kind of save a little bit of time here. Go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. That looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and actually swing down this way. Now, this is actually a GPS coupled approach. This is not like a fancy ILS approach or anything like that. So it's perfectly fine if we go ahead and kind of do it the old-fashioned manual way. Notice you can change these things, and the navigation mode will not kick you off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the window. I haven't looked out the window like in ages. I don't even know where I am. Jeez. You guys know where we are? I think we're still in... I think this is a new... Oh, the sub base. I'm sure they're going to love us flying over the top of their heads. Yeah, they're not. And there we go. Now we're heading towards Jordan. Pretty cool trick. And normally on the real one, as well as some other simulated ones, it's a little bit easier to do that step. You can also, of course, at any time go like this, and you could go ahead and activate vectors to final if you needed to. But again, that's for a very different tutorial. That's for a very different day. So don't worry about that too much. So let's go ahead and land this thing. I think we pretty much covered most of what I wanted to look at. By the way, if you're really, really annoyed that the radio is bothering you, you can actually come over here and turn on and off different radio channels. For one thing I really like to do is I actually like to use the communication radio, my number 2, to go ahead and listen to ATIS rather than use it as my main one. So you can see I've swapped that one on. And we'll make sure it's active. Yeah, that's going to be the one I'm receiving. There it goes. Of course, we're probably picking a runway we're not supposed to use.
Few clouds at 4,200 feet. Few clouds at 12,200 feet. Temperature 2.10. Altimeter 30.
Yeah, now that's one feature that more flight simulators need. So at this point, normally we'd have to fly that entire approach. A lot of times what's going to happen is air traffic control is actually going to tell you not to fly the entire approach. They're going to give you kind of a short circuit. Or if conditions are nice enough, they'll actually be so nice to go ahead and allow you to go ahead and land it. All right. I actually need to confirm that my landing gear are down. Good. All right. Everything looks good. Power's good. Gunful check is completed. I got 2 white lights. I got a white and a red. Looks good. Change my seating position a little higher. Now notice, if you look really carefully, that little tiny Y right there, just to remind me that that would have been my best climb speed.
Cleared to land runway 23 Diamond 6.
Now notice how far off the VASI system is versus the actual big old numbers at the end of the runway. Jeez. Ah, that was nice. Ooh, man, the brakes on this thing are intense. Darn. And that's it. Hopefully you found that little video kind of helpful as far as the basic functionality. One thing I will end saying is, again, this is pretty early on. I'm sure some of these features will change, and we'll just have to revisit it with a new video. Other than that, enjoy.